What's going on, guys? Welcome to In the Zone podcast. I'm your host, Garrison, where I help you stay in the zone, and that's with more of a skill acquisition, mental minutes. We also got interviews for other coaches on how they help other guys stay in the zone and train and perform at their best. And also, we got rants, which is kind of one of those things I'm going to get into today. Uh, but before I get into that, if you guys want to share or maybe even suggest any topics, I would love it. Please submit those to any of the platforms that you see this podcast on or to my email in the zone podcast123 at gmail.com. I like to compartmentalize my email so they don't get buried with all the other stuff that I have going on. So have that email separate for just you guys to submit. So I check that pretty much almost daily. I get those notifications. So I want you guys to submit those. So please feel free to do that. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into this rant that I'm going to go on a little bit today. So, and again, rants are not necessarily me always complaining necessarily. This is just me of like, okay, hey, this is a reoccurring theme. This is something that I see happening over and over pretty frequently within being in this industry for about 7 years now, coaching wise, and obviously through my playing career. A lot of guys right about this time of year when they're ramping up right after Christmas break, getting ready for that spring season, or getting ready for that tryout or whatever it might be, right? A lot of guys tend to complain about arm soreness, or hopefully not, but maybe they even have some arm pain, right? And that's something that you, as the athlete, I'm speaking to the athletes here for this one, you have to observe and know where these recurring soreness spots are, right? And again, there's a difference between soreness and pain, or a difference between, hey, I just feel stiff coming through a workout, and hey, I'm getting sore in my tricep, like right here, every single time after I throw. That's really specific and really pinpointed, and probably it's shining a light on something that either is doing too much work or it's taking a toll and pointing a finger at right one thing, right? So a lot of guys think, oh man, my elbow, it's my UCL. Don't try to freaking diagnose yourself, guys. Like, this isn't what I'm trying to say, but you need to at least observe and like, okay, I always get sore here. Is this something to do with why I don't have enough tissue tolerance for this? Or is this something that I need to train better? Is this something that my mechanics are forcing me to do? Or is, a very common one would be a lack of internal rotation that tends to decrease as guys start to throw over the course of the season. So that's also something to keep in check, right? So, and if you don't know how to do this stuff, ask. Hey, I'm here for you. And I'm sure there's plenty other coaches that if you have a better relationship with and you reach out to them and let them know, and if they don't have an answer, I say keep asking questions until you do. But I want to also give you guys some solutions to whenever you have arm soreness, right? And movement alone sometimes does alleviate a lot of just general soreness. Again, not pain, but just soreness from maybe too much of a ramp up, or you're just getting right back into it first time on the mound kind of thing. You're throwing at 100% intensity for the first time since you've been back, right? All these things can be solved when you just move, right? And I assigned a lot of my athletes these things called joint moves, which I got from Dak. As Brady Volmering was one of the main ones that turned me on to that. But really just moving the joint for 50, 100, maybe even 200 reps. And I think this is really good for post-rehab guys as well. But it's something to really consider. And you can't be a couch potato right after you go lift, right? Like, if you're sore in your legs, you probably got to move your legs around and you'll probably get rid of that soreness, right? But also a big thing too that you want to monitor, other than just having some of that, when you're moving, you have a lot of tools and tricks to facilitate that blood flow. I love the Voodoo floss and the Mark Pro for those. So those are also external tools that you can use to help build that up, right? And help avoid any stagnation or all the blood flow to basically just kind of be stuck in one place. So you want to get rid of any of that inflammation, because inflammation is basically stagnant blood cells. So when you get new blood in, and bad blood, quote unquote, out, right? That stagnant blood that has that inflammation. That's where you're going to get a lot of that soreness out when you start to do these things, right? Or anything that facilitates blood flow. I mentioned just general movement. Heck, it could be even going into a sauna or into a hot shower or something like that. And even doing a hot cold contrast, like that's really popular these days, probably can help. I'm just not a huge fan of putting ice on particular areas because it does restrict the blood flow. So if we're at the point of getting rid of inflammation is trying to restrict, if you're restricting blood flow, but you're trying to get the blood flow going through a certain area, for example, the elbow, and you're putting ice only on that spot, you better be red hot, torn, and tender, and possibly have an injury. Or, for guys who get hit by pitches, like that's a traumatizing event. Yeah, you probably can put some ice on that. That's totally different. Or global icing, cryotherapy, or big ice baths. I'm cool with those too, because that's more of a total body regulation thing. And again, I'm kind of getting on an ice tangent here, but to kind of bring it back in, you got to make sure that the tools that you're doing, the things that you're utilizing, and you're lining up your training to help you recover better and help you not be as sore between outings, right? And also just monitoring your changes, right? So obviously, and this is kind of shifting gears here, it's really more of the coach's side to kind of monitor some of these things, whether it's, I don't want to get too much on the data side of things, but you could go down and break down things of what's changed as far as release height or, all the stuff that all of these new bells and whistles can kick out at us, or even just, hey, you went from 20 pitches to all of a sudden you went to 50 pitches. Of course, you're going to be sore after that. Fairly natural if you just ramp up your workload a little bit more. And there was a really good tweet or post, I guess you could say, coming from Scott Richardson, who he talks about, getting into more of the nitty gritty. And I'm going to see if I can find it. But basically, he's talking about how a lot of guys don't throw enough. So a lot of these injuries that are happening are also due to guys just being a little bit more unconditioned to be able to take on some of these things. And I can't seem to find it, but this is something that us as coaches, we need to monitor that delta, that change. And I think I saw a tweet on that the other day as well, but that's also the thing that you have to monitor and be like, okay, hey, did we try to change his mechanics? Is this causing some soreness or a discomfort? Probably shouldn't go down this route. So a lot of things to go into there, but you got to make sure also that you're going to set the kids up for success. You're not going and just looking at all these reports. You literally sometimes just have to ask them, hey, how did you feel today? Terrible. I slept really bad. I did this, and then from there, you're like, okay, cool. Let's chalk it up as a bad day and not get too lost in those data points. That saves you a whole night of trying to dig down a rabbit hole and trying to figure out how to fix this guy when all it took was you to just ask him, how do you feel? It's so simple sometimes, and we overcomplicate things. It's honestly crazy how much, and even myself, complicate things a lot more than we should. And just overall recovery, right, guys? Like, I think if you're not allowing yourself to recover, let's say your throwing volume is really excessively high, or you're, throwing a lot of off-speed pitches, or you're noticing that your recovery is down, you're not bouncing back fast enough overall, you probably are better off doing less training. So if you're training 3 days during the season, maybe ruffle that back to two total body days, especially if you're a bullpen guy. That's probably a good area to kind of stay in so that you can still be ready. Do some more low intensity movement, mobility type stuff in between. And of course, with the coach's side of things, we also have to educate the athletes on, hey, this is why this is happening. These are the things that you need to do to help prevent this or to keep this at bay, right? So just a few things for me to rant on here a little bit whenever I hear guys saying and complaining about arm soreness. You got to keep all those things in check. Make sure that you're not only checking the amount of pitches that you're throwing, but also all of the warm-ups, all the things that you're doing in between. Like, are you taking a bunch of days off and then all of a sudden you're going from no workload to excessive amount of workload to then no workload, right? Those are major spikes. And you probably need to make sure that you're not going. Imagine if that was your blood sugar, right? You go from no food to then sugar high to then no food, right? You're going to crash. You're going to feel like crap. Same thing when it comes to throwing volume. When you go here, you can start easy. Be like, hey, we're going 60 feet for about 5 minutes. Then you go 90 to 120 the next day. And then you're like, hey, I'm a long toss into comfort. And then the day after, you're ready to rock and roll. Like, that's just a general progression, and depending on how your arm feels. As us as coaches, this is really hard to coach. You really have to kind of be around a guy to help him utilize that tool that he has in his own brain of like, okay, hey, this is how I feel, and not being a hypochondriac or oversensitive to his arm. So there's a big difference there with that too. So again, this is rather lengthy, but this is something I'm relatively passionate about. Of course, I'm not a doctor. If you feel any pain or anything that's, excruciating or chronic over time where you're just like, hey, I always get sore here, or this is very painful, I can't move my arm or do that. Yeah, you guys probably need to get that checked out. Go to your athletic trainer, or if they refer you out, go to a PT, an orthopedic specialist, and make sure that you listen, but also don't take it to heart too much. Sometimes these docs or these people that help out, they can get it wrong. And I'm not saying to go in and expect everyone to be wrong, but question them. Find out, hey, what did you do to do this? Or what brought you to the conclusion of it being possibly this? Versus them just slapping on the old tendinitis title on everything. Great, cool. What are my plans of action of how I can do this? If they don't give you that and they just give you some NSAIDs, you're probably headed in the wrong direction, or they're probably just trying to get you out of their face. Unfortunately, it's really sad, but find someone with some answers. I'm always willing to help out and can point you in the right direction. Again, disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, but I have seen a lot of injuries come across my plate as a coach. Unfortunately, I don't brag about that necessarily, but I've seen a lot of guys where it's like, hey, this might just be general soreness, or hey, these are kind of shining the light to, like, so let's say, for example, bicep soreness. If you're constantly getting bicep soreness, that's usually the first line of defense for the labrum. So a lot of it is me just trying to have to go back and look at your assessments, which is probably my next rant that I'm going to get on here. So hope you guys tune in for that one. But yeah, again, soreness versus pain, two totally different things, two totally different approaches. Players, be upfront and honest with your coaches. I know that sometimes they're going to be able to tell you, hey, if you're sore, then you're not going to pitch. But you got to have someone that you go to that's going to be willing to help you progress as an overall athlete and to not run you into the ground, right? So whether that's a personal coach that you have, or maybe a coach that you've had in the past that's not writing out your lineup card or not giving you opportunities, I can see how that can kind of be a tug of war for guys. But on the coach's side, be open to listen to them and at least consider, okay, hey, this guy's considering or constantly complaining about this arm pain. Maybe we give him a day more of rest, or you don't make him get hot the next day, right? Like, again, it's a lot easier said than done. I do know that sometimes you have that one dude that just is going to get it done for you when you want to make sure that you win this game because maybe your career depends on it. I understand. I get it. I know that at the end of the day, winning is everything, right? Like, you guys need to win, but at the same time, you can't make that at the expense of the health of an athlete. So appreciate you all listening and tuning in, and stay in the zone.